One moment, I was just Maya, bringing groceries to my parents on a quiet suburban street. The next, a routine traffic stop turned deadly, threatening to expose a secret that could unravel my entire life. The air in my old neighborhood always smelled the same, a mix of freshly cut grass, chlorine from a dozen backyard pools, and nostalgia. It was the kind of suburban quiet that felt expensive, a place where the biggest drama was usually Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning roses getting snipped by a rival gardener. I was cruising in my dad's old, meticulously maintained sedan, a car that screamed, responsible family man, not federal agent. On the passenger seat, a bag of groceries held the key ingredients for my mom's famous lasagna. It was my weekend off, a rare 48 hours where I wasn't Analyst Turner. I was just Maya, the daughter who was finally home for a visit. I saw the flashing lights in my rearview mirror just as I turned onto my parents' street, Primrose Lane. My stomach did the familiar, sickening little backflip of dread that every black person in America knows. It's a feeling that bypasses logic and goes straight to primal fear. I wasn't speeding. The car's registration was current. My taillights worked. I knew this, but it didn't matter. I pulled over, the smooth purr of the engine dying as I killed the ignition. I rolled down my window, placed my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, and started the internal monologue. Stay calm. Be polite. No sudden movements. Give him no reason. The cop who approached my window was the textbook definition of a guy who peaked in high school. He had a beefy neck that strained against his collar, and a smirk that suggested he'd already decided I was guilty of something. His name tag read, Miller. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice dripping with a condescending drawl. He leaned down, peering into my car, his eyes lingering on the grocery bag, then on me. "You know why I pulled you over?" "No, officer, I'm afraid I don't," I said, keeping my voice steady and respectful. Years of training in high-stress interrogations, usually on the other side of the table, had taught me how to control my breathing, how to keep my heart from hammering against my ribs. He tapped a thick finger on my side mirror. "You stopped for a full 3 seconds at that stop sign back there. A little perfect. Almost like you were trying too hard not to be noticed. Makes a man wonder what you're trying to hide." I almost laughed. It was the most ridiculous reason for a traffic stop I'd ever heard. Pulled over for obeying traffic laws too well, but I just nodded. "I always try to be a safe driver, officer. License and registration?" "Let's see 'em," he grunted. I moved slowly, deliberately, narrating my every action. "Okay, officer, I'm just reaching into the glove compartment for my registration now." My hands were steady, but inside, a cold fury was beginning to simmer beneath the trained calm. This was a game, and he was enjoying it. He was enjoying the power. After I handed them over, he studied my license for an uncomfortably long time. "Maya Turner," he read aloud, as if tasting the name. "You're a long way from home, aren't you? This address is clear across the state." "I'm visiting my parents, sir. They live right down the street, number 214. I pointed vaguely ahead. "I was just bringing them some groceries for dinner." His eyes narrowed. "Your parents live here? In this neighborhood?" The implication hung thick and ugly in the air between us. "People like you don't live in places like this." "Yes, sir. For 30 years, I said, my politeness now feeling like a lead weight in my mouth. He handed my documents back, but he wasn't done. He was fishing. "What do you do for a living, Maya?" My protocol was clear. My cover was a mid-level data analyst for a boring tech firm. It was bland, believable, and designed to end conversations. "I'm a data analyst, officer." "Uh-huh. Data analyst." He shone his flashlight into my back seat, then back to the front. The beam landed on my work phone, which I had stupidly left on the passenger seat next to the groceries. It wasn't a standard smartphone. It was a hardened, encrypted satellite phone, thick and black with a short, stubby antenna. To a civilian, it just looked weird. To a cop like Miller, high on his own authority and looking for a reason, it looked like a threat. His entire demeanor shifted. The smug condescension was gone, replaced by a sharp, aggressive suspicion. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice suddenly hard. "It's just my work phone, officer," I said, my internal alarm screaming. I had made a rookie mistake, a stupid, careless mistake. Work phone? What kind of data analyst needs a phone that looks like a damn detonator? He sneered. It's for secure communications, sir. My company is very strict about cybersecurity. I was trying to de-escalate, to sound as boring and corporate as possible, but it was too late. He had found his reason. His hand went to his hip, resting on his sidearm. I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, ma'am. Slowly. This was escalating far too quickly. Officer, with all due respect, I haven't done anything wrong. Out of the car, now, he barked. The click of his holster unsnapping was deafening in the quiet evening air. I complied, my mind racing. I was calculating, analyzing. The street was empty. My parents' house was 100 yards away. There were no witnesses. My training was a loud, clear voice in my head, overriding the civilian fear. Threat assessment. One armed, agitated officer. Probable bias. High risk of escalation. As I stood up, my jacket shifted, and the edge of my own concealed firearm holster, a slim, federally mandated piece of equipment, became momentarily visible in the sliver of space between my jacket and my shirt. It was for less than a second, but his eyes, already paranoid and searching, locked onto it. That's when everything went sideways. "Gun!" he screamed, his face contorting with a mix of fear and what looked like triumphant justification. He scrambled backward, fumbling to draw his weapon. Get on the ground now, hands where I can see them. In a split second, his Glock was out, leveled, and pointed directly at my chest. The black hole of the barrel seemed to suck all the air out of the world. My lasagna ingredients, the smell of my mom's house, the entire life I had so carefully compartmentalized it all, vanished. There was only the officer, his trembling hands, his panicked shouts, and the cold, hard reality that my cover was about to be blown in the most violent way imaginable. He saw a black woman with a gun. He wasn't seeing a federal agent. He was seeing a threat that needed to be neutralized. I stood there, my hands slowly rising into the air, staring down the barrel of his gun. He thought he had me cornered. He thought I was just some girl in over her head. He had no idea. He had no idea that my heart rate was now perfectly steady, that I was no longer afraid, and that in my mind I was disarming him in 3 different ways before he could even process a trigger pull. He had made the biggest mistake of his career. My name is Maya Turner, and my compliance had just expired. "Lower your weapon, Officer Miller," I said. My voice was unnervingly calm, devoid of the panic he was expecting. It was the voice I used in secure briefing rooms, the voice that cut through noise and demanded attention. It was not the voice of a victim. His eyes, wide and twitching, stayed locked on me. His knuckles were white on the grip of his Glock. I said on the ground, "Now, don't make me tell you again." His voice cracked, the bravado fraying at the edges. He was scared. I could smell it on him, a sour mix of cheap cologne and stress sweat. And a scared cop is the most dangerous kind. "You heard me, officer. I am giving you a direct lawful order to lower your service weapon," I stated. My hands still held high but open, a deliberate show of non-aggression. "You are currently aiming a firearm at a federal agent in the performance of her duties, which is a felony, a serious one." From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The front door of my parents' house creaked open. My dad, still in the ridiculous apron he wore to cook, stepped onto the porch. "Maya, what's going on? Is everything all right?" His voice was full of a gentle confusion that shattered my heart. Miller's head snapped towards the sound, his gun wavering for a fraction of a second. "Get back inside. Now, show me your hands," he screamed at my father, a man who wouldn't hurt a fly. That was it. The line. He had just crossed a line he could never uncross. The cold professionalism inside me was now laced with a white-hot, protective fury. "Officer Miller," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming as hard and sharp as chipped flint. "Look at me. Do not look at the civilian. Your attention is on me. Your threat is me. Is that understood?" He flinched, his gaze snapping back to me as if compelled by an invisible force. He was losing control, and he knew it. This wasn't following the script he had in his head. "I have a firearm because I am authorized by the United States government to carry one. I am going to reach into the left side of my jacket with my left hand and retrieve my credentials. You are going to keep your weapon trained on me, but you will not fire. You will place your finger outside the trigger guard. Do it now. It was a gamble, a massive one, but it was a calculated risk based on his profile. He was a bully, not a killer. He was driven by ego and a desperate need for control. By taking control away from him so completely, so methodically, I was short-circuiting his brain. He didn't move his finger. "I'm not—" "You don't give me orders," he stammered. "My call for backup will be a lot different from your call for backup, Officer Miller," I said, lying through my teeth. I hadn't made a call. "When my people get here, this entire street will be locked down. Your chief of police will be woken up at home and informed that one of his officers has created a national security incident. Your name, Daniel Miller, born July 3rd, 1985, 2 commendations for traffic duty, and 1 formal complaint for excessive force, will be the subject of a federal investigation by morning. This is your last chance to de-escalate." His mouth opened and closed like a fish. The mention of his name, his birthday, the specific details of his file, it was a sledgehammer to his fragile authority. How could I know that? Who was I? Slowly, almost imperceptibly, his finger moved to rest on the frame of his gun. "Thank you," I said, my voice softening just a touch. Now, as I said, left hand, inside the jacket, very, very slowly. My hand moved with a fluid grace that felt alien in the context of this ugly, tense standoff. I didn't break eye contact with him for a second. My fingers found the familiar leather of my badge holder. I pulled it out, letting it hang from its chain. I didn't flip it open. I held it out, still closed. "I want you to take 3 steps forward. Take the badge holder from my hand and examine it," I commanded. "Then you will apologize to my father, and you will leave." He hesitated, then took a shaky step forward. Then another. He was close enough now that I could see the sweat beading on his forehead, catching the red and blue flashes of his patrol car lights. He snatched the leather holder from my hand. His fingers trembled as he fumbled with the clasp, finally flipping it open. He looked down. The large golden seal of the Central Intelligence Agency gleamed under the street lights. The eagle, fierce and protective, stared back at him. My photograph, clear and professional, was next to it. Below that, my name, Maya Turner, and my title, Clandestine Operations Officer. He looked from the ID to my face. His own face, which had been a mask of rage and suspicion, began to crumble. The blood drained from it so fast he turned a sickly, pale gray. His eyes went wide with a dawning cosmic horror, the look of a man who just realized he'd tried to swat a fly with a nuclear bomb. "See, he whispered, the letters dissolving on his tongue. His gun hand, the one that had been so steady with righteous fury just moments before, began to tremble violently. The Glock dipped, the barrel now pointing at the pavement. His other hand, still clutching my credentials, went limp, his fingers uncurling. The badge holder slipped, falling to the asphalt with a soft thud. He swayed on his feet, his eyes rolling back into his head. A low, guttural groan escaped his lips as his knees buckled beneath him. He collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. It wasn't a dramatic movie-style fall. It was a clumsy, undignified heap of a man hitting the pavement with a heavy, final-sounding thud. For a moment the world was silent except for the chirping of crickets and the frantic, rhythmic flashing of the cruiser's lights, painting the scene in surreal strokes of red and blue. Officer Miller was out cold. My dad, who had been frozen on the porch, finally lurched into motion. "Maya, my God, what happened? Did he shoot you? Are you okay?" He was halfway down the lawn before I could even process what had just occurred. "I'm fine, Dad. Stay there," I ordered, my voice sharper than I intended. The agent in me was still running the show. The scene wasn't secure. "Go back inside and call 911. Tell them an officer is down, unresponsive. Give them this address." He hesitated, his face a mess of confusion and fear. "But who are you?" The question wasn't about my name, but about the woman standing before him, the one who had just verbally dismantled an armed police officer until he fainted. I'll explain everything, I promise. Just please, call 911. He nodded, a dazed look in his eyes, and retreated back into the house. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with the unconscious cop and the pulsing silence. I knelt beside Miller, my training kicking in automatically. I checked his pulse strong but rapid. His breathing was shallow. He wasn't faking it. He had genuinely fainted from shock. I unholstered his Glock, cleared the chamber, and placed the weapon and the ejected round on the hood of his cruiser. Then I picked up my credentials from the asphalt, the golden seal feeling heavy in my hand. This was it. The breach. The one thing my handlers always warned me about. Never ever break cover unless your life is in immediate mortal danger. I guess staring down the barrel of a shaking gun, held by a terrified cop on a power trip, qualified. My work phone buzzed on the passenger seat of my car. I knew who it was without looking. The phone was geofenced to my parents' address. The moment I powered it on here, a low-level alert was tripped at Langley. A call from my handler was protocol. It was meant to be a simple check-in. Now, it was a cataclysm. I answered. Turner. Everything okay, Phoenix? It was Marcus, my handler. His voice was calm, but I could hear the underlying tension. Phoenix was my operational codename. Hearing it here, on this street, felt like a violation. We have a situation, I said, my voice low and clipped. I gave him the 30-second version. Routine traffic stop. Escalated by the officer. Threat to a civilian family member. Forced to reveal my status. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the protocols being accessed, the cleanup crews being notified. Is the LEO compromised? He asked, using the acronym for law enforcement officer. He's unconscious. Fainted. Local EMS is en route. And the civilian? My father. He's secure. He saw the interaction, but not the credentials. Another lie. My dad didn't see the badge, but he saw something shift in me, something he wouldn't be able to unsee. The daughter he knew wouldn't have been able to do what I just did. Okay, Phoenix, stay put. We're spinning up a team. I want you to control the scene until they arrive. No one talks to you. No one questions you. Your cover is now federal agent. Ongoing investigation. Divulge nothing else. Is that clear? Crystal, I said. And Maya, he added, his voice softening for a moment, breaking protocol. Good job staying alive. He hung up. The distant wail of a siren started to grow, a sound that usually meant help was on the way. For me, it meant the beginning of a whole new nightmare. The local police would arrive first, then the paramedics. They would see one of their own on the ground, and me, a black woman, standing over him. My credentials would stop them from arresting me, but it would start 1,000 other questions. The story would leak. An armed cop fainting at the sight of a CIA agent's badge in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was too good a story to stay quiet for long. My career, my carefully constructed life, was imploding in real time. Headlights swept across the street as the first police cruiser screamed around the corner, followed closely by an ambulance. 2 officers, younger and more athletic than Miller, jumped out, their hands already on their holsters. Police! Ma'am, step away from the officer, the first one shouted. I held up my badge holder, the credentials now open for them to see. Federal agent, I said, my voice carrying the full weight of the authority it represented. This scene is under federal jurisdiction. Secure the perimeter. No one gets in or out. They stopped dead in their tracks, their eyes wide as they took in the impossible scene. A decorated officer unconscious on the ground. A woman who looked like she should be bringing a casserole to a potluck holding a CIA badge, and the silent, flashing lights that made it all feel like a fever dream. The paramedics rushed past them towards Miller. As they began working on him, one of them looked up at me. Do you know what happened? Did he have a medical condition? Before I could answer, Miller's eyes fluttered open. He blinked, groaning, his gaze unfocused. He looked at the paramedics, then at the other cops. And then he saw me. His eyes locked onto mine. The fog of unconsciousness vanished, replaced by a fresh wave of sheer, unadulterated terror. He scrambled backwards, crab-walking away from me on the asphalt, a pathetic, whimpering sound escaping his lips. "Get her away from me!" he shrieked, his voice hoarse and panicked. She's not who she says she is. Check the car. Check her car. It's in the bag, in the grocery bag." The two younger cops exchanged a confused, wary glance. Miller's shrieking was unhinged, but it was also a direct accusation from a fellow officer. One of them, the taller of the two, took a hesitant step toward my car. "Ma'am, I'm just going to take a look." "You will do no such thing," I said, my voice like ice. I stepped between him and my father's sedan. "That vehicle and its contents are now classified evidence in a federal investigation. You do not have the clearance to look at it, let alone touch it." Miller, now being helped to his feet by a paramedic, pointed a trembling finger at me. "Don't listen to her. She's a spy, a terrorist. I saw the package in the bag. Wires. A timer," he babbled, his mind clearly concocting a fantasy to justify his own terror and incompetence. The word timer hung in the air, a spark thrown into a room full of gasoline. The cops tensed. Even the paramedics looked nervous. This was the moment it could all go wrong again, the moment local panic could override federal authority. My cleanup team was still minutes away, an eternity in a situation like this. "He's delirious," I said, directing my words to the more senior-looking of the two officers. "He drew his weapon on me during a routine traffic stop without cause, endangered a civilian, and fainted when I identified myself. He's either having a psychotic break or trying to create a narrative to save his career. Which do you think is more likely, officer?" The officer, whose name tag read Santos, looked from his hysterical colleague to my calm, unyielding face. He was thinking, processing. He saw my posture, heard the authority in my voice, and contrasted it with Miller, who was now weeping openly. Before Santos could make a decision, a sleek black SUV without markings turned onto the street, its engine a low, powerful hum that cut through the noise. It glided to a stop, boxing in the police cruisers. Two men in dark, nondescript suits stepped out. They moved with an efficiency that was terrifying to watch. They were my people. Marcus got out of the passenger side. He wasn't in a suit, but in jeans and a jacket, looking more like a concerned neighbor than a high-level CIA handler. He walked directly to me, ignoring everyone else. "Agent Turner," he said, his voice calm and in control. "Situation is handled. We'll take it from here." He then turned to Officer Santos. "I'm Special Agent Marcus Vance, CIA. This is a matter of national security. Your officer," he gestured dismissively toward the blubbering Miller, "interfered with a federal agent during a sensitive operation. We will be taking custody of him for debriefing. Your chief has already been notified and has agreed to cooperate fully." Santos just nodded, looking profoundly relieved to have the decision taken out of his hands. One of the suits gently but firmly guided Miller toward the black SUV. "What package? What timer?" Miller was still muttering, trying to salvage some piece of his shattered reality. Marcus sighed, then walked over to my car. He reached into the passenger seat and pulled out the grocery bag. With a theatrical slowness, he reached inside and pulled out the offending item. He held it up for the remaining cops to see. It was a digital kitchen timer, the kind you stick on the fridge, still in its plastic clamshell packaging. Next, he pulled out a box of lasagna noodles, a container of ricotta cheese, and a large can of crushed tomatoes. "This is your package, Officer Miller," Marcus said, his voice laced with pity and contempt. "She was going to her parents' house to make lasagna. You almost shot a CIA agent over a kitchen timer she bought at Target." The silence that followed was absolute. The sheer, idiotic absurdity of it all crushed what little credibility Miller had left. The other cops couldn't even look at him. They just stared at the ground, their faces burning with second-hand embarrassment. My dad had come back out onto the porch, drawn by the new arrivals. Marcus caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. "Handle it." While the suits dealt with the local police bundling a now silent Miller into their vehicle, I walked up the lawn to my father. He looked at me, his eyes full of a million questions. "Maya," he began, his voice barely a whisper. The man said, "CIA." I took a deep breath, the smell of cut grass and my childhood filling my lungs. The lie was over. "Yes, Dad. That's where I work. Not as a data analyst. I'm an officer. I wanted to tell you, but—" "You couldn't," he finished, his voice filled with a sudden, dawning understanding. He looked past me at the black car, at the quiet, efficient men who had appeared out of nowhere to manage the chaos. He looked at the wreckage of Officer Miller's career smoldering on the pavement. He finally looked back at me, and for the first time he didn't just see his daughter. He saw the woman she had become. He pulled me into a hug, fierce and protective. "Your mother's lasagna," he murmured into my hair. "She's been waiting all day. Let's go inside. These people can clean up their own mess." I let out a shaky laugh, a sound of pure relief. As he led me toward the warm light of the house, I glanced back. Marcus gave me a final, approving nod before getting into the SUV. The vehicle pulled away as silently as it had arrived, taking Miller and the ugly incident with it. The remaining police cars and the ambulance, their lights now off, quietly packed up and left. Within 5 minutes, Primrose Lane was quiet again. It was as if nothing had ever happened. The quiet was different now, though. It was no longer the sound of suburban peace. It was the sound of a carefully managed secret. I stepped into my parents' house, the smell of garlic and oregano replacing the scent of ozone and fear. My cover was blown, my career was in question, but for the first time in a long time, I was no longer hiding. I was home,